All right, everybody. Well, welcome to another episode of Call Me Mr. Broadstreet. As my special guest, again, we've got Scott McKinley back, as you remember from the episodes with the John Lennon book, of course, that Jude Sutherland Kessler wrote. Very brilliant series. He's been doing the voices for that. Tonight's topic. So we're going to be talking a little bit about the film, give my regards to Broadstreet, some general information, as well as focusing on two aspects of it. We've got the Eleanor's dream sequence, and also sort of my favorite sequence, which is the warehouse sequence, which Paul and Ringo are rehearsing a little bit earlier in the film, before the Eleanor's dream sequence. But I think first of all, we'll go ahead and start. Scott, welcome back on the show. Good to have you again, sir. And how you doing today?
Well, thank you, Ed. It's very nice to be back. Doing fine, thank you. And it's kind of nice to be able to talk about Broad Street. I think it's one of the most severely underrated things that the Beatles did as either a solo project or a together project. And because of that, I think it really does bear rewatching, and which is why I really wanted to talk about Eleanor's Dream, and also just to talk about Paul's background in film and his interest in film and where that might have come from.
Mhm. No,
But
definitely, definitely. Well, let's start a little bit with so give my regards to Broad Street, a little bit of Solo Beatles 101, of course, for folks that follow the channel or even new subscribers. Released in 1984 in October, I believe, if my memory serves correct. Has
yes,
New York, London, and LA as well. Nationwide release. Wasn't the most commercially successful. It's a personal favorite of mine, but of course, $1 million opening weekend against about a $9 million budget, give or take. But what was it like, kind of, watching Broad Street at the time, and kind of some of your perspective on it?
well, I don't remember the first time when I got to actually watch the movie. I had just turned 21 when the movie came out, and I was in college and just finishing college actually. But I remember it being touted before then, and I remember seeing advertisements for it. I did run out and buy the album, and I know you've got multiple copies. Here's mine,
It,
and it's got the original sticker, whatever that is. What do you call the
that's the
sticker?
hype sticker. Yeah, love
The
that. Yeah.
hype sticker. I'd never heard it called
Okay.
that
Yeah.
before. So here it is brand new bought. I haven't even opened it yet, so I'd forgotten it was a gatefold.
Yep.
Basically, this has been played twice. Once just to listen to it, and the next time to record it to cassette tape, because then you don't have to worry about getting scratches and all that on there, and you'd listen to the cassette.
Yep.
This is how we did this old school back in the day.
Gotcha.
But anyway, so I've remembered it being really talked up on MTV at the time. And so for you kids or younger people who may not know just what an influence MTV had on music. I mean, just the introduction of officially just putting out your favorite musicians with your favorite music with videos to go by it had only started back full time in 1981, was it?
Yep.
Or 82? I can't remember which.
81, August of 81, I believe.
And so you had it 24/7 if you had cable television, which was a big guess back then. We didn't have it at home, not for not until I went to college, actually. My parents finally got it when I went to college. And when I got back, I got to watch it, which is where I got to see the promos for Give My Regards to Broad Street and No More Lonely Nights, which was the big single that came off the album. And it is one of McCartney's finest. I think I've heard you say it's your favorite.
Absolute favorite, number six on the US charts, number two in the UK charts.
Mine might have been My Love
My
back
love,
in the day.
very good
I
choice.
remember when that first came out too, and it was just a joyful song.
Yes.
But I digress. Anyway, I remember the commercials on MTV for it. Um, was it McCartney's first video for MTV?
No, his first video, if I'm going, and I remember as a kid, as a Gen X, sort of seeing this on MTV as well around that time. No, that
Oh,
would
you're
be,
right. I was trying to remember, of course, his previous albums, Pipes of Peace.
yep, and Tug of War. So I think that it may have been Take It Away, but the first video, if I'm remembering correctly, that they actually played may have
Take It
been,
Away came out before MTV was created, if I'm not mistaken. I never saw Take It Away on MTV.
it was briefly on MTV. first video they played was from the 1979 concert, I think, if my research is correct. So they had it at that point from the Campuchia concert from
I
the
was gonna say Campuchia, yeah,
yep,
yeah, Rockestra.
yep,
And
exactly.
yeah, I remember that. And trying to find the singles that had McCartney and was it which one had the flip side Soily?
Oh, put me on the spot here. Soily was the flip side. Let me see. 19, we're going with the studio recording.
No, there's a live one.
Live one
Isn't
was
there?
the flip side. I believe so. Flip side would it be Maybe I'm Amazed from 76? Without looking that up, I'll be honest, I'm
I
sorry.
don't know. I'll have to remember it, but I remember there being a couple of things from Campuchia that my friend and I were hunting down. As I was saying before we started the conversation, I haven't really had a chance to talk about any of this stuff at all since shortly after all of this stuff, I never had anybody to talk to about it,
Mhm,
about my thoughts about all the McCartney music at the time and how much I loved Tug of War when it came out and how it took a while to warm up with Pipes of Peace.
mhm.
But I liked the music video for that, and I definitely remember Pipes of Peace. And of course, Say, Say, Say.
Yes.
And I remember watching Say, Say, Say for the first time on Friday night videos on ABC.
NBC, close, my friend. NBC, yes, Friday
There's
night
only
video.
three to choose from.
Yeah, exactly.
Uh,
The big two besides MTV. Yeah, exactly. We're going down the same memory lane, but no, continue.
anyway, and that's a fun song. I've never regretted liking that song. It's it's catchy. It's silly now, but I think it's pretty good. And
Yeah.
McCartney put his all into it, and Jackson was there for the ride, and so was Linda
Oh yeah, yeah,
McCartney.
exactly. Literally in the video, of course, at the end, and then in the song as well. No, definitely very catchy. Hey, it's very enjoyable. It's a good part of what I think what a lot of people call the George Martin trilogy: Tug of War, Pipes of Peace, Give My Regards to Broadstreet. Um,
Well, what I wanted to do before we get into Eleanor's Dream was to talk a little bit about my expectations for Give My Regards to Broadstreet when it came out, because I knew that, and I remember seeing articles about it,
mhm,
McCartney's interest in doing something film related before Broadstreet came out with Ringo.
mhm.
And at some point, something science fiction-y was being discussed. And so I thought I remembered a photograph from Time magazine of him and Ringo dressed in some sort of a science fiction kind of costume, as opposed to a Western kind of costume, which I think you know what I'm talking about.
You're
But
talking about the cooler, right?
I am talking about the cooler,
Yes, yes,
but
okay.
I don't remember that photograph. I remember a different one that was never shot, or if it was released,
Hmm.
I don't remember anything about it. But it could be the cooler
Yeah,
because I've never seen the cooler. Or if I have, I don't remember having seen it. And I don't know if they've ever shown that at one of the fests, for instance. So I'll have to see if I can find that out because I'd be
yeah.
curious to see the whole thing. But even before then, I know that McCartney had been interested in like oh, I was going to say science fiction
Hmm.
from a while back, and if I can find where I put it, since my screen changed here. Hang on a sec.
Sure. No, no worries at all. And while we're sort of waiting for that, I think if I'm remembering correctly, I could be wrong. It was something to do with Gene Roddenberry. Am I remembering that correctly? I thought there was something with Gene Roddenberry. Gene
If there is, I
Roddenberry,
don't know it.
some
Let's
sort of
see how
connection.
this shows up.
All right.
Well, you can see it.
Oh,
So
I
here's
can.
a
Yeah.
picture of McCartney. I think it's from '64,
Hmm.
and he's reading a paperback called Earthman Go Home, which is by science fiction writer Harlan Ellison. This
Yes.
came out around 1963, 64. I know Ellison despised the title of it because he didn't call it that. It was originally called Ellison Wonderland. But
Oh.
that's, I think, when McCartney was sucking up all of the different things that when he was living with the Ishers. There
Hmm.
is one other thing, and I haven't found this in any McCartney biography.
Hmm.
If you bear with me just a second, I've got a source right here.
Yeah, no worries.
And it's let
It's
me
all
just
about
move
this.
my other books out of the way, like She Left You by
Ah,
Jude
of
Sutherland
course.
Kessler.
That's a familiar book right there.
Or maybe Lennon the Mobster and the Lawyer,
I think I've
which
seen that.
audiobook I might have done as well
Possibly,
by
possibly.
Jay Bergen.
Ah, name sounds familiar.
While I get to this, are
Oh,
you familiar with this book?
I'm familiar with the author. I'm not familiar with the book itself, though. Isaac Asimov, a giant of science fiction.
This is Asimov's autobiography, Volume 2, and he eventually wrote a complete total of four. The first two came out while he was alive. The third and fourth were published posthumously. And but in here, this is how I happened to find out, was reading this book, not because of the Beatles,
Mhm,
but he talks about this event that happens in late 1974. Okay, so 1974, he's still with Wings.
mhm.
We're around the Venus and Mars era.
Yep.
And Asimov writes here, I'll just read a little clip. I had received a letter from a lawyer who represented Paul McCartney, who had once been a member of the Beatles singing group. On December 19, 1974, in consequence, I kept an appointment with McCartney. McCartney wanted to do a fantasy, and he wanted me to write a story out of which a screenplay could be prepared. He had the basic idea for the fantasy, which involved two sets of musical groups, a real one and a group of extraterrestrial imposters. The real one would be in pursuit of the interlopers and in pursuit of the imposters and would eventually defeat the imposters despite the fact that the latter had strange supernormal powers. McCartney did not have any details on what the imposters were up to or how they could be stopped. He had only a snatch of dialogue describing the moment, and I think I'm doing more Carl Sagan than Asimov at this point, but he had only a snatch of dialogue describing the moment when the real group realized they were being victimized by imposters. I agreed to do a treatment. So here's Asimov writing something for Paul McCartney. I had agreed to do a treatment preliminary to writing the story and did. In the treatment, I accounted for everything what the imposters were doing and why, and how it was that the real group, with all the odds against them, could manage to win out. It was a suspenseful, realistic, and moving idea, and I took it rather proudly. I was paid for it, but McCartney didn't want it. He went back to his one scrap of dialogue out of which he apparently couldn't move and wanted me to work with that. I bowed out politely, and my career as a movie writer died a morning. Thank goodness.
Wow.
Elsewhere in his autobiography, he talked about um, people wanting to adapt his works for movies and just about none of it going very well. So that's a little bit of perspective on that. But was this an anecdote you had not heard before?
This is one I have now. We're going to pause here because this is one I hadn't heard before. First of all, very good Carl Sagan. We miss Carl Sagan. He's one.
And I was trying to do Asimov, who has this beautiful Jewish Brooklyn accent, and I just die for it. But I haven't practiced it enough in a while. But Carl Sagan, I like to do a lot.
Oh, of course.
Atmosphere of Venus is 90 times that of Earth.
Yes. Oh God, we miss him. I'm telling you, brilliance like that, especially. And this I hadn't heard before because, with this, especially the group of imposters. Let's think about this. A group of imposters, the real group, the Earth One we'll call the real group, and the Earth Two, the imposters, whatever else you would want to name them. That's an interesting idea. I mean, to me, that's even still could be an interesting idea for somebody to do, not, even if it's not McCartney himself.
And
Imagine
I would
from that
think the
way.
real group would be Wings.
Yeah, I would agree.
Who would be the anti-Wings?
Let's
Hmm.
see.
You probably have a made-up group.
Yeah, we could probably do, I don't know, Herman's not hermits or something like that. I don't know. Much love to Herman's Hermits. I don't want tomatoes thrown at me for this one, if for the Herman's Hermits fans, a wonderful group, but
Well,
you
you're
know,
thinking 70s, so the music changes a little bit.
that's
Maybe
true.
something to do with Elton John, who was
Oh,
certainly a
yeah.
rising talent at the time, or David Bowie. That's right. Yes.
Everyone. Uh,
And here's something else I hadn't realized. Now, I played this album about I don't know how many times when I got it on cassette and tape. I played it a lot. I bought it in 1984. Okay. And I don't know if I wasn't aware of this until I knew we were going to do this, and I'm like, I should probably play it again. I've heard the song a gazillion times for No More Lonely Nights, and I love it, but I hadn't heard the rest of the album in a while. Don't know where my cassette is. I have a turntable, but I haven't connected the new needle for it yet, and then I have to connect it back up to my computer. It's
yep.
an old stereo, but it's with the right jacks, you can plug it into the computer and you can digitize it and all that kind of stuff. But so I went out to Spotify and I'm like, wow, Eleanor's Dream sounds different. It's longer.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know, but on 1984, Eleanor's Dream is 1 minute and 10 seconds. And
Yes.
and how long is it on the 1993 release?
Oh, let's see. On the CD release, we're thinking 2 minutes for Eleanor Rigby, plus maybe another 8 or 9, if I
Eight
remember.
or nine. 8 or 9. I had only heard 1 minute and 10 on the record. So
Yeah.
when I first heard Eleanor's Dream, and I know I'm getting ahead of myself for all this, I really loved it. I thought it was such a wonderful accompaniment to the original song without taking away from the original song.
Yes.
And I loved it so much that I had the movie on VHS.
Yep.
I went from VHS, digitized the song for Eleanor's Dream onto my computer, and then put it out onto a cassette tape. Oh,
Yep.
oh no, this was before my computer. I did it as a mixtape.
Yeah.
So I ran it out from the VCR to my is it the tape recorder, my tape
It
deck on
had,
my
it had to
stereo,
be a tape deck. Yeah.
and then I mixed that with the original Eleanor Rigby from the Beatles because I prefer that to McCartney's redoing of it
Hmm.
because McCartney's redoing of it sounds beautiful, but you're lacking the backing vocals of the Beatles.
This is true. Yeah. Yeah.
And so I tried to, and it didn't really work, unfortunately. I didn't have the wherewithal to properly mix them together so it would be seamless. But that's how much I liked it, that I ran it from VHS to tape recorder just to listen to the full mix again before 1993. And I never rebought the CD because I was behind in catching up with everything else. Remember how expensive records were even back then?
Oh, yeah.
6.98 was about the average. If it's a double album, 14, 12.99, something like that.
That's something along those lines. Yeah. So, I mean, you're
And
talking the cost
I
of,
had spent all of the money that I had because I knew the Beatles were coming out on CD for the very first time in 1988.
yeah.
So what does that mean? It means you will never hear again. This is what I'm thinking in 93 or 88, I means never again will I be able to hear all of the early Beatles albums in stereo
Oh,
because the wisdom of the people, wisdom of the powers that be decided that all the US mixes shall be removed and all the UK mixes will be issued and in mono.
oh,
And I think stereo just sounds better.
yeah.
Yeah, there's extra reverb on the Capitol, and that does take away from the purity of the sound, but at least it's stereo. And with headphones on, you can get a lot out of those early stereo mixes
Oh, you
that would
can.
have otherwise been buried in the mix, as it were. Just
Cool.
just my own 2 cents. I'll get lots of hate mail for that, I'm sure. But so what I was doing before the CDs came out, I was rebuying all of the Capitol albums, all the early ones before they disappeared forever. So I
Yeah.
have mint copies of all of the early ones, and I spent
Oh,
all this money on that, because songs and stories of the Beatles, the double album, of course you have to have that
yeah.
because
Yeah.
I
No,
knew that would be deleted. It's a terrible album.
I understand. I understand the completion. Believe me, on this film right here, and I mean, rewatching Eleanor's Dream as was as we're going through. We got the film, and I rewatched it probably I don't know, earlier this evening as we're recording this, so maybe about an hour ago or whatever it was that
Yeah, I watched it again last year, and I started watching it again today, and for Broadstreet, the whole thing.
Yep.
And I'd listened to a couple of reviews from before, and It's hard to remember just how much hate the reviewers gave into that, almost like it was personal or like a takedown,
Yes.
which they didn't need to do. And McCartney's rather like, I don't know how he kept it together. He did. He managed to act um, properly when people were just being just absolute jerks about it.
Oh
I
yeah, there's
remember Gene Siskel in
yes.
particular,
Yes.
just finding it hilarious that how bad the review was, and McCartney just like, I invited you here to talk about it, like I wasn't expecting you to assassinate it, and McCartney's they're just looking very restrained about it. Give him credit. I remember the first time seeing it, and I remember the reviews. My take the first time was, well, everybody says it's a bunch of music videos stuck in, and then there's no real movie there. Now, my take was basically like, I like the music videos. So therefore, okay. Yes, the plot is weak in the fact that I think the missing tapes angle
Hmm.
is handled a little too lightly.
Hmm.
In other words, it almost looks humorous in that you have all of the serious consequences of lost mixtapes without really going into the detail of like, no, 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 the film isn't exaggerating. They're worth millions of dollars,
Oh yeah.
and having it as a bootleg instead of an original release will undercut the whole label basically for the year.
Yes.
And that's a rather serious. I'm sure it was partly based on what happened to Wings when they were in Africa recording Band on the Run, and the original tapes were stolen. The things that I like about Broad Street that
Hmm.
aren't normally given it, McCartney is really good at trying to figure out characters. He likes characters, he draws them very well. And the fact that he has this image in his head of what a drummer should look like,
Hmm.
which is sort of like Animal from the Muppet Show.
Yeah.
Just a guy who's really into it. And when Coming Up came out, the studio version with all of the characters being played by Paul and Linda,
Yeah.
certainly the drummer looks like that with the same kind of way that he describes the drummer. And
Yes.
his current drummer, of course, looks like that too. McCartney really has an idea of what people should look like. That giant guy from the movie, was he a bodyguard or something? I'm trying
He
to
was
remember.
oh no, Giant Haystacks was a UK wrestler who sadly passed a while ago, but he
Oh,
would have been perfect for Harry Potter if he was still around when they
yes,
were,
he would have.
yeah,
And it just
Giant.
he's there because McCartney happened to like the character or the type. I
Yes.
respect that. Ralph Richardson has no business being there outside of, I think, McCartney just happened to like him,
Yeah, and
or
you could
just thought that. Or what do you have a thought on it?
well, I think the part he represents to
Yes.
me, especially there's the conversation where they're sort of near the end of the film. To me, it represents Paul's father, Jim, in a way. I think
Oh,
it's
I
a bit
hadn't
of
thought
that
of that.
older mentor figure to Paul. His father never obviously lived to see the movie come out. I'm sure he would have enjoyed it very much so in that old English kind of tradition. That's how I look at it. But I get what you mean. So like when you say he has no
Hmm.
business being in it, you mean as far as like other roles he had done with Shakespeare and stuff like that, or
Yes, and I meant like, why would Paul invite him specifically? And I have a feeling it was specifically. I don't know that. You
Mhm.
know more than I do. It's one of the
uh,
reasons I was looking forward to this interview is that I was
you
hoping
know,
you'll fill me in on things.
that's, to me, that he just asked Ralph Richardson literally wanted to, do the film. He said, I'll do it for you. It's the last thing he filmed. So you have Greystoke, Legend of Tarzan, earlier in 1984 that comes out.
Oh, that's
This is
right.
actually the last thing he filmed. He said, "Hey, he did this for me. Sir Ralph did this for me." You see some nice photos, some nice behind the scenes photos of Ralph in his kind of tie and sweater get up from the movie, and Paul kind of strolling around in the back lot area. And definitely that, at least that section to me kind of represents Jim, the old wisdom, sort of telling Paul, okay, I mean, yes, don't worry about it. Don't be in such a rush. Look around you. I think it's a much more poetic figure that people tend to miss, especially probably Gene Siskel. No offense, Gene, or obviously Gene's family, since he's since passed, but I
Yeah.
happen to disagree on that opinion. Um, but yeah, that's kind of my take on it. And then, of course, you get the Eleanor's dream sequence again. Rewatching it, wonderful sequence, and that's usually not been one of my favorites. But what's kind of your feelings on it? Your sort of your take on it? I know the scenery or the music itself. I know you've expressed that.
The music I really like because um, Eleanor Rigby, the song, which is one of my all-time favorite songs. I came to the Beatles as a kid. They were still together when I was a kid. So a little tip of the hat how old I am. And the thing I remember first, of course, is probably the Beatles cartoon show. And I certainly remember watching that in reruns back in the late 60s, early 70s.
Mhm.
But to me, the thing that really caught my attention, which wouldn't have been until the 70s, was Yellow Submarine. Yellow Submarine knocked my socks off. And you've got music from all sorts of different albums on there too. So it's not just the original music, which I loved,
Mhm.
and I really liked George Martin's score for it, the Pepperland theme. If you've heard the Sea of Monsters recently, listen to it with headphones on. It's scary. It really is. It feels like you're at sea and the waves are a little too high.
I'm
I
gonna
I
listen
I
to that.
just
I've got the archive. Yeah,
I grew up at the shore.
yeah.
Anything to do with the sea interests me. And so the submarine was wonderful. And I'm wearing my yellow submarine t-shirt right now. I mean, because I loved Ellen. That was the first time I ever heard Eleanor Rigby was in that movie. I'd never heard it on the radio, and I didn't have the record. And that whole sequence at the very beginning that looks like they're all taken from photographs. And I know there are various people in there that are actually from the film or like producers and stuff in those photographs, but it's gorgeous. And that whole sadness to it gives it a somber feel. And the way that McCartney took that, put it back in the new film, and continued it with a classical strain. And again, Eleanor Rigby is one of the few songs that has strings on it for the Beatles. What a wonderful way to continue it is to continue the strings where they left off.
Yes.
And that becomes a running background theme. And so for the first time ever, I listened on Spotify or whatever you want to listen to on whatever. My son has a subscription to Spotify. That's the only reason we have Spotify. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I listened yesterday to the full segue, or 2 days ago. I listened to it again yesterday, of Eleanor Rigby and Eleanor's Dream from
Yes.
"Give My Regards to Broadstreet," the full version, which I had never heard before. I The version in the movie is longer than the one that's on the CD.
Yes.
I hadn't realized this.
Yeah.
And so what they did on the CD was they took, which is a little overextended in the movie, and they compiled it and crunched it to it. I think it's just the right length. I think it's about 6 minutes and something for Eleanor's Dream on the CD,
Yeah.
and 2 or 3 minutes for Eleanor Rigby.
Yeah.
And so with the headphones on, listening to it without the movie, it sounded even better than I
Mhm.
remembered.
Yeah.
And every little note in there, there's a little playfulness going on. Um, and I just thought it was nice. The I liked what McCartney tried to do in the film. So in Eleanor's Dream in the film, you've got McCartney and Ringo
Yeah.
and Barbara Bach and of course Linda, and you've got Brian Brown from the film and who played Harry?
Ian Hastings played Harry, and you've got Tracy Ullman as well. So there's the
Was she
Simpsons.
in the Eleanor's
She
Dream
was in the
sequence?
Eleanor's Dream sequence as well as the cafeteria sequence. Yes. So it's all
Wow.
connected.
I know she's in the movie, and I
Yep.
remember McCartney being in her single. Um,
They don't know about us.
they
Yes.
don't know about us, and because she talked about that, how she would love to have McCartney on, and she looked so excited in the video.
Of course.
And from there, went to the Tracy Ullman show, which is where I first saw her, outside of the video, and then, of course, that's where The Simpsons started. So
Yes.
I've been watching The Simpsons since before The Simpsons.
Interconnected, all
All
interconnected.
interconnected. I like that. But the so I liked what McCartney was trying to do with and he I think he mentions it as Dickens.
Yes.
But when I first saw shots of it with him with the long sideburns, I'm like, ah, this is the way that I saw the painting back in the uh, somebody did a painting of the Beatles as if they were like Edwardian gentlemen or
Yes.
something from the Victorian era with the that look. Have you seen that?
But
Like, yeah,
something
yeah, 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 yeah. What? I haven't seen that forever. Oh my gosh.
part of the collection right there. See, you never know. I've never even read
And
the
that's
book.
the kind of thing that I saw, and I'm like, is that a record? Oh, I'd buy that in a second.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a record, but I did buy somebody did an instrumental of if different composers did the Beatles.
Yes.
And I remember somebody doing Eleanor Rigby in the style of Bartok.
Yes.
Du-du-du-du-dum. And the guy who's the orchestra leader is on the cover. It's an Abbey Roadish cover, and
Yep.
he's also there crossing the road with them. Oh, I haven't thought about that in a long time. But anyway, I thought that was a great idea for him to do that because I could see that being right up there. The movie captures most of that. Yes, them going over the thing. You could see that they're overacting, which takes away from it. And
Hmm.
that's one of the reasons that McCartney doesn't look natural as an actor.
Hmm.
He's very self-conscious, and you can tell that. He also doesn't really see himself acting as a character. He has a
Yeah,
hard time not playing himself.
that's true. Yeah.
And that's why he's not an actor, I think, because he can't shake that. It's difficult
It's
for some folks to do. It took me forever when I started voice acting to like, you're not playing yourself, you're playing somebody else. What would
yeah.
they do? Not you, you know?
Yeah, it's outside of character. No, when I was rewatching it, I think I mean, okay, so there's a little dramatic overacting, sure, them mild oval of surprise or them going over the fall.
Yes,
No,
that in particular, with Ringo and Lynn. Oh,
yeah, and then Barbara just all diving over. I look at it from a little different angle though. Maybe follow me on this one, especially maybe watching it more recently as opposed to when someone might have seen it, in the theaters or shortly after it, came out. So you got them falling over the waterfall. And I think in a weird way, maybe representing a little bit fear of loss that he felt around this time. It may sound far-fetched, but if you think about it, hadn't been too long since he lost John,
yeah,
losing somebody close to him. You've got Harry stealing the tapes in this section, which was Inception before Inception happened, as we know with the film, with the whole plot of it. And especially later when he's going through, he's seeing the ghosts of Ringo and Barbara, or especially the ghost of Linda riding along. Especially watching that now, it's a bit eerier, as we know
yeah.
what happens, obviously in real life. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but that's kind of the things I take away from it. Beautiful set pieces, wonderfully photographed or cinematography rather. What did you think of like the cinematography and everything of that whole
Oh,
entire?
beautiful. The
Yeah,
scenes in the snow with
yeah.
him running and leaving the footprints just so it looked beautiful. He does his best to fit into the role, and I give him credit for that.
Mhm.
Meaning that I like just seeing him with the long sideburns and the famous McCartney eyebrow.
Yes.
It looked great. And I thought Ringo looked really good too, as far as the beret.
Yeah.
That is the style that some folks would have worn back then, especially in Europe.
Oh yeah.
So I give him credit for that. Beautifully filmed. It looked so natural. Yeah, I think the only thing that takes you out is that waterfall of them going over. They didn't do
Yeah.
that
It's
back
the,
then.
the
There were certainly waterfalls, but you would never get that close to it. That would be a problem. At least I think, if I remember from is it Three Men in a Boat? Not
Yeah,
to
yeah,
mention the
or
dog.
don't yeah, exactly, or don't go chasing waterfalls, stick to the rivers you are used to, as Paul once sang,
That's true. I love that song.
Yeah, that's a wonderful, so maybe a little bit of that, maybe subconsciously, I don't know, but it is beautifully shot. I like kind of the Wrath character coming through. You see, of course, the mirrored, or what is it, the mirrored kind of window being rolled down. He's wearing those mirrored, not a monocle. It's almost these Teddy Roosevelt style of They,
Pondene. They're
what's
called
this?
Pondene.
Pondene. Oh,
Well, it's not
something
spelled
new.
like that. It's
Yeah.
spelled Pincedenez, but
Oh
I
wow.
believe it's pronounced Pondene. And yes, Theodore Roosevelt did wear those.
Oh wow. Okay. Well, there we go. That's learning something new every day. I like. I
Very
love
much turn of
the.
the century for 18th
Yeah.
to 19th century. Yeah.
Now is that
19th to 20th, sorry.
and that whole sequence? And I mean the orchestration, of course. I mean, didn't they? I've never gotten to see. Well, I have it somewhere, but there's a South Bank show where they're kind of going into a bit of that with the production with George Martin. So what do you feel about like
Really?
the scoring? Well, they go into behind the scenes on the film. I don't know if they go into the production specifically that score, but they show Paul and George working on the
I'll have to
you
look
know,
for
at the
that.
beginning. South
Yeah,
Bank show.
and I have seen a little bit about the No More Lonely Nights, the making of
Yep.
that. That was like a mini documentary around the time, because the single came out the year before the movie did, didn't it?
No, just a
Didn't this?
couple weeks before. So
Oh,
basically,
okay.
we're probably talking about a 2 to 3 week lag time between the single and then between the film itself. So it's all very close together during the fall of '84. Of course, at the same week that Broadstreet comes out, a slight small film you might have heard of called The Terminator came out. Just a little science fiction film.
I didn't see that when it came out, by the way. I
Oh
wish I
wow.
had, but I didn't.
Yeah,
I
no, I
missed that.
no, not until VHS later for me. I didn't get to see that. So I mean, Eleanor's Dream. What kind of feelings does it evoke? Like when you're watching it, what type of mood does it set for you when you're watching this sequence or whenever you're hearing music?
Well, the only thing that disappoints me is that it's a little drawn out.
Mhm.
And from what I've read recently, that was because they had so much time that they had to fill that I guess while they were working on the film, the producer director had just put in classical music, generic for a while, and that they had to come up with something original for it.
Mhm.
I wish I knew more of it about it than that. Maybe you know, but I like the way that it switches, and I just wish I wish the container that has the missing film didn't look like a glowing lozenge
Oh, I see
of
now.
some
This
kind.
is where I'm going to disagree a little bit because I'd love kind of that very Star Wars type effect on it. But
It looks like
I
it's
get
got
your
two
point.
light bulbs in it. I think you can see the light bulbs if you look at it in one of the scenes from the right angle. Like, yeah, they
Yeah,
got light
yeah,
bulbs.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
So it's that took away from the I think the sense of Dickens time because that whole scene with him with Harry falling down on the stairs,
yes.
with the cut and all of that,
Oh
and
yeah,
McCartney just looking at him. I thought he did that rather well. I thought it was a great scene outside of the glowing lozenge that he's holding.
the glowing lights.
And I thought, there's just overdoing that little suitcase so much.
Mhm,
And that was, I think the worst part about the film
mhm.
is just that the resolution for people who haven't watched it, I'm not going to do any spoilers. The resolution was a little too like, you got to be kidding me. At least that's how I felt at the time.
Hey, everybody. Well, I've had a wonderful time talking with Scott, especially about the Eleanor's Dream sequence, the Broadstreet film itself, the warehouse sequence, a bit of everything in between with Broadstreet. So, Scott, just wanted to go ahead and give you the chance to go ahead and just, again, where can folks find you? I'm going to link to the last information as I had. And
Well, thank you
anything.
very much, Ed, and it's been a pleasure being on the show again. You can find out any information about myself and the projects that I'm working on or have done on my website, which is McKinley Co. That's McKinleyco, short for company, McKinleyco.com. And for what's going on, I have an audiobook coming out. This one is not on the Beatles, but it's a very interesting true crime book that happened in colonial Massachusetts during the Revolutionary War about a conspiracy of a woman to murder her husband. Actually happened. That will be out on audiobook any day now. As soon as it's approved by Audible, it'll be out. It's already been sent. It's called Bathsheba Spooner, a revolutionary murder conspiracy. I hope you'll check it out at some point. excellent book, excellent audiobook, I hope. Uh, Thank you very much. And more Beatles stuff will be coming up soon. Too soon to announce anything, but please look for it.
Excellent. Well, like I said, I'll link to the information as I was pointing out. Still got your card from the fest right there. I know the
Thank
camera's
you
not.
very much.
Oh, of course. It's actually always right here, a place of honor, as I'm near the computer and everything. So, Scott, thank you. I appreciate it.